Scientifically, right now, no one understands how experience occurs. No one. Because when you look at something, look at a rose or a piece of furniture, what goes to your brain is an action potential, which is basically electricity, shift of ions. What happens in your brain is electrochemistry. We do not experience electrochemistry, we experience a three-dimensional reality in linear time. How does that happen? If I ask you to imagine a rose just now in your consciousness or in your imagination, or a beautiful sunset, there's no picture in your brain of any of that. So the fact is, scientifically nobody knows what experience is or how it's created. You know, many versions of this are, it's called the heart problem. Everybody talks about it. The key is to understand that your experience of either the physical world or what you experience in mental space, thoughts, feelings, emotions, images, sensations, none of that is fundamental reality. It could not be. Common sense. If an insect with 100 eyes is looking at me, he doesn't see the me that you see. A bat echolocates and senses the world as ultrasound. So perceptual experience is a species-dependent phenomenon. And there are many versions of it. Which one is the right one? It's also culture-dependent, because the way you're taught to perceive actually creates the neural networks that reinforce that particular experience. If you bring up a group of kittens in a room that is only horizontal stripes, then we'll grow up seeing a horizontal world. Not because furniture legs don't exist, because your brain doesn't have the networks to see that particular stimulus. So even though the brain is created by genes, it's sculpted by experience. In turn, then the brain also is necessary for experience. So it's created by experience and then it's necessary for experience, unfortunately. The same experience. You're locked into a fixed reality. It's what they call a premature cognitive commitment. So what you see is definitely not what is. Okay, and yet all of our science is based on observation and empirical measurements, empirical so-called facts. In fact, if you don't give empirical facts, then that's not being scientific. What's the empirical evidence? And that is based on a big misunderstanding that what the empirical fact or measurement is fundamental. The empirical fact is a species-dependent mode of observation in a species-dependent nervous system and a particular cultural context. It's not reality. The question is then, what's reality? And the spiritual traditions, at least, in the wisdom traditions of the East anyway, they say the universe is consciousness and its contents. So you experience your body in consciousness. Where else do you experience it? You know, you experience a mountain in consciousness. You don't experience a neural network, you experience a mountain. You experience a thought in consciousness. And you experience the universe, the stars and galaxies in consciousness. So where the Eastern wisdom traditions come in is they say that the universe exists in consciousness. Universe is consciousness and its contents. Here it gets a little interesting. What are the contents? We say, oh, there's the physical universe, but you know, The physical universe is not physical. Nobody can tell you actually what the physical universe is. 96% is dark energy and dark matter. 4% is atomic. Of that, only 0.01% is actually visible as the stars and galaxies. So the rest is either unknown or unknowable. We don't know what, we can't even interact with it because it's not atomic, it's not light. And the one that we can interact with it seems is made out of nothing. You know, subatomic particles, you go beyond that and you're left with nothing. So what is the nature of the universe? Don't know. Why is there awareness of the universe? Is the nature of the universe, is the universe and awareness of the universe the same thing? And the Eastern wisdom traditions say yes. That fact, even though you think you see a mountain, what you're experiencing is images in your own consciousness and sensations in your own consciousness. It's your body that you experience as the universe, and even the body ends up being, you know, images, sensations, and consciousness. So hardness, softness, color, taste, smell, these are forms of consciousness within consciousness, and there's nothing else. So consciousness, pure consciousness, it interacts with its own self, creates the experience of an observer, and that which is being observed, but that which is being observed is a quality of consciousness within consciousness. And in the deepest reality, there's no single observer anywhere, because it's a qualia experience. You know, if I say I, so who's I? DEPAAK. Well, who's DEPAAK? Where is DEPAAK? You won't find me here. Reality is what is fundamental reality is non-dual awareness, or what is called non-symbolic experience, non-symbolic persistent experience. Because everything else, including your mind, your body, the individual observer, the objects of observation, they're symbols of consciousness within consciousness. So fundamental reality is non-symbolic, persistent experience, even when you're dreaming or in deep sleep. And those are the higher states of consciousness where your sense of self is no longer a personal self, where you recognize your thoughts are not yours, nor are your emotions yours, and your perception, you begin to see, you know, again, you can see, if you want, physical reality, but you can also go deeper and experience energy fields, and ultimately I would say qualia fields. That's all there is. And even beyond the qualia fields, there's basically just yourself. And that's called Brahman consciousness. And that is reality. Everything else is a projection. You know, it's like if I have light coming through a film and it's projecting on the screen, I know it's light that is projecting on the screen, but I don't like the image, so I fight with the cinema screen. But, you know, it's just all light. And furthermore, light is not what we think light is. You know, we say light is bright and photons and color, but light has none of those attributes. Okay? The only light that exists is the light of awareness. Because without the light of awareness, even what we call fundamental particles, you know, science is so bamboozled by the superstition of materialism, and furthermore, it's based on subject-object split anyway, okay, which is artificial. The subject and object split is totally artificial. Nature is one, the universe is one in its activity. So first there's a split, which is not real. You're not the observer of the universe, you're an activity of the universe. And, you know, the activity of the universe, in this case, has a subjective feeling called I. Okay, but there is no observer, that's why it can't be found. You know, so when you can't find the observer, then there are only two choices. Either it's the hallucination of a biological robot, Daniel Dennett, etc. It doesn't exist. Well, that's a position you can take, that the observing self is a hallucination, which actually then reinforces the idea, so is the world. If the observer is a trick produced by your brain, so is the world. Why be partial only to the observer? Or, since you can't find it, it doesn't exist in space-time. Okay, it's non-local. And that's where the Eastern traditions come in. They say if you forget this observation, if you practice self-awareness, transcendence, you question your perceptual reality, make conscious choices, you will see that there's a quality of awareness called second attention. First attention is to be bamboozled by the images. And then second attention is to see the light of awareness that is projecting those images, and ultimately go beyond that to the fundamental ground of being, where all observers, all modes of observation, and all objects of observation are just differentiated aspects. The whole universe is a differentiated aspect of a non-local, dimensionless reality. Not in space-time, but giving rise to space-time. Not physical, but appearing as physical. Not mental, experiencing thoughts, images, all created by itself. It's beautiful actually, because I think you can experience it if you just pay attention to it. Yes, we confuse the image with the reality, and in wisdom, in the Sanskrit word, by the way, for this is pragya parad, which means the mistake of the intellect. Okay, we give a lot of importance to rationality, and yet we don't. So, what is rationality? Where does it come from? You know, people are very critical of the irrational when we can't really explain the rational. People are critical of out-of-body experiences when you can't explain the fact that you're having an in-body experience without being in it. I mean, it's very interesting that we're looking for the extraordinary when the most ordinary is the most extraordinary. We cannot explain existence or awareness of existence. That's a scientific fact. Now, if you look at spiritual experiences that are fundamental to what is called the religious experience, you see they have the following characteristics. They have transcendence, going beyond the subject-object split, whatever the methodology, technique, or maybe absence of technique. That's number one. The second is a kind of emergence of what is called Platonic values: truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. The third is the loss of the fear of death, because you realize that death is as much an illusion as birth. Well, if you were never born, then you can't die, you know. The fourth is a kind of epistemic humility. You basically have to surrender to the mystery of existence. And all the scientific theories about existence, the Big Bang, etc., I find them very strange. To have a dateable event when there was no time. How do you have a dateable event when there's no time? What's the location of the Big Bang when there's no space? Okay, you ask the Big Bang experts, they say, oh, it happened everywhere. Had happened 13.8 billion years ago. From the perspective of what? From an earthling with a brain now in this planet in some junkyard of infinity? So it doesn't make sense. Okay, then what happened during the Planck epoch, which is 10 to the power of minus 43 seconds, when the laws of physics didn't exist? There's breakdown of space-time. So what happened? Why did it happen? Why did the Big Bang not happen earlier or later? Well, that's also meaningless, because when there's no time, there's no earlier or later. So, you know, it's all nice to put these things in equations, but you can't conceptualize them, and it makes people safe to put them in an equation. These are modern mythologies, total modern mythologies. So I think when you understand that actually the best answer is we have no idea, then you're humbled into epistemic humility. And from that comes a reverence. Reverence for what? For existence. And I'm not being mystical. Existence means that which exists. The most ordinary is the most extraordinary. And that is where spirituality can take us, if we want it to take us. Of course, there's a different sense of self. You don't think of yourself as squeezed into the volume of a body in the span of a lifetime. There is a detachment from your thought process, disengagement from the lunatic asylum that we all live in. You know, you look at the world, look at the news, look at television. This is a lunatic asylum. Okay, how is it not a lunatic asylum? People killing each other, eco-destruction, war, terrorism, extinction of species, possible extinction of humankind. It's a lunatic asylum. Now you have the choice. You can either join the inmates or you can pick up your visitor's badge and say, disengage. Because even when you engage, by the way, as an activist, you join the lunacy. So there's this emotional sobriety that comes with that. And then you do begin to see perceptually, you pierce the veil of matter, even the veil of energy, and see reality as it really is. You know, the reason people have confidence in science is that it creates technology which we use. So I came here on a jet plane. I'm using my computer. I can text you a message. So if this works, then science must be true. Well, it is to a certain extent. It is true for the perceptual experience and the manipulation of the perceptual experience. But it's not telling you what's the meaning of all this, okay? What is fundamental to all this? It doesn't tell you. Furthermore, science is based on certain things. It's based on theories, experiments, observations. Well, theories are conceived in consciousness. Experiments are designed. I'm pointing here, but it's not here, okay? Theories are conceived in consciousness, experiments are designed in consciousness, observations are made in consciousness. So science is an activity in consciousness. And yet we are ignoring it. It's the elephant in the room, okay? And we can't see it. Yet every experiment we enter through consciousness. It's not the right model. First, and then secondly, the at least current model of science is based on what we call a physicalist ontology. Even the quantum physicists are physicalists, okay, because they say particles, okay, and they think, oh, we have a hadron collider now, and there it is. No one's ever seen a particle, by the way, okay. We see tracks of particles, and even those tracks are space-time events in consciousness. There's no such thing as a particle. It's a hap, H-A-P, a happening in consciousness. And every perceptual moment is a hap. It's a happening. Whether it's a hap at the micro level or it's the hap at the level of the universe, stars and galaxies. Hap means happening in space, a space-time event in consciousness. I would give you an example that maybe would make sense. A perceptual experience is a photograph of a moving reality. Molecules are pictures of a moving reality. There are no molecules in the real world. Okay, there are no electrons or photons or anything in the real world. It's moving. If I go to the ocean, I take a picture with my iPhone, and there's this beautiful bird, and you know, there's a beautiful wave, there's a rainbow, etc. And say, come, see, I just saw this. You say, let's go see it. Well, when you go there, it's not there. Every time what you perceive, it's already happened. It doesn't exist. You've taken a snapshot. And then you take the snapshot to be the reality. You create. I think this is what they meant probably, metaphorically in the Bible, the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. You sacrifice the reality to create a perception of reality, and then you can use it for divine or diabolical reasons. You make iPhones, but also nuclear bombs and mechanized death and chemical warfare, everything possibly you can for diabolical reasons. And then, of course, that is because you are not seeing fundamental truth, which is non-dual. It's beyond all of this. Your body, the universe, these are activities. They're not nouns, they're verbs. You can't catch a verb. And in fact, nouns don't exist. They may be conventions of language, but in reality, there's no noun. And see, that's people like the Buddha and all saw that very clearly. There's the famous story where he's looking at a rose and Ananda smiles and they smile back, and all the disciples go to Ananda and say, well, we saw a flower. What did you see? He said, well, I saw rainbows and sunshine and earth and water and wind and air. I saw the infinite void. I saw the universe pretending to be a flower at this moment. Okay, so interdependent co-arising, impermanence in time, non-self nature of objects, they all mean the same thing. Impermanence in time, because impermanence is the snapshot of perception. So that also means non-self nature of objects. The object doesn't have a self independent of the universal self, and acausal, which slowly scientists, no cause can be ascribed to the Big Bang, so-called. No cause can be ascribed to fundamental particles coming out of a void. They say, okay, that's random, okay? Everybody says it's random because there's no cause that you can ascribe to particles emerging from the void, from the field of possibilities. But then they follow distribution patterns that end up being quantified in Schrodinger's equation, and there's a whole universe then. So what randomness and creativity are complementarities of non-duality. The argument is fallacious. Is it random? Is it purposeful? It's neither. It's complementarity. If everything was predictable, there would be no creativity. It would be an algorithm. Nature is not an algorithm. So this is the problem with science. We have a long way to go. Meanwhile, we can use our cell phones and fly the jet planes.